You are listening to the Obstructed View Red Sox podcast, presented by Beyond the Monster.
All right, welcome back. It is a brand new episode of the Obstructed View Red Sox podcast. And today we have a special episode. We're going to talk some Red Sox with the Red Sox beat writer from the Boston Globe. We have Alex Speier. But before I introduce Alex, I'm here with Jamie. How's it going?
It's going good. It's been a busy morning, as Alex can attest with the JT news, and Red Sox Twitter is reacting great to that, as we all expected.
Yeah, so this is being recorded on a Tuesday. We'll drop it same day. Justin Turner is no longer a member of the Red Sox, and we'll touch upon that briefly a little bit later on. But today we have Alex Speier of the Boston Globe. Alex, first off, thank you for taking the time to join us on the podcast. How are you doing today? How's everything going this off season?
How's everything going this offseason? Well, the offseason's almost over, so that's always a kind of eye-opening revelation when you look up and you're like, oh man, it's about February. I'll be going down to Florida very soon. I think that it feels like a strange offseason, given the expectation of a certain level of activity that was going to happen at the start of it and relative inactivity, or at least activity on the margins that's actually occurred. But that said, all good. Off seasons are great. It is a wonderful thing to be around family on a kind of more consistent and frequent basis during the off season before I disappear for quite a large fraction of the coming year.
Yeah, no, it's coming quick. It's less than 2 weeks before pitchers and catchers are going to start heading down there. When do you typically get down to spring training? Are you down there right when they're getting there too? Is it a few days after? What's your routine?
I try to get down for that initial assembly in spring training, in part because I do have 2 school-age kids, and I like to take that time off to go on to do something with them during school vacation week. So I like to kind of have some foothold in what's going to happen with the Red Sox before I disappear for a week.
No, yeah, we were there last year. We did I think it was like 3 days. Got to really experience, just being able to walk around, like how open that it was. You can walk around to all the fields, the backfield, see the minor leaguers. Got to interact with some of the players too. A lot of it from doing the podcasting helped. They were able to recognize, they would come over. We got to speak to Chaim, which was really kind of, I would say, for people who didn't really have much of an interaction with higher executives and within baseball, to be able to kind of talk to the person who's making these personnel decisions of the people you're watching on TV, like right in the near a baseball field, was something that we certainly enjoyed. So looking forward to getting back down there. I guess my question is, do you think Craig Breslow is going to be as accessible as Chaim was?
Totally fair question, and the basic answer is we don't know, because there's a limited track record to run on. He's been far less accessible in his first offseason than was Chaim throughout his Red Sox tenure. Whether or not that is how he plans on approaching the job moving forward, or whether or not that is a reflection of just a transition and having a lot of stuff to do when you're learning a new organization from top to bottom, and really having he was deeply involved in everything that the Cubs were doing, but I do think that it's a bit of a different beast when you are kind of present physically in the day-to-day, everyday operations of your new organization. So totally understandable if he's been immersed in that, but it's going to be interesting. We'll see. He was wonderfully accessible as a player, incredibly thoughtful, and willing to talk about himself or his teammates, or about things that were outside of the game. We'll see whether or not that's the case as he goes through his first spring as chief baseball officer.
I want to take it kind of back to the start of your career. What made you want to get into sports writing and have this be your pursue it as a career?
So I did not intend to follow this career. I did not seek it. In college, I wrote travel guides. I traveled to different parts of the world, and I loved that. I thought that that was going to be my future. It looked like there was going to be an opportunity to do that after college, working on travel guides and a TV show that was related to going to different places around the world. And unfortunately, that vision kind of collapsed. The business side of what we were trying to of what a few of us were trying to build ended up collapsing. So I ended up kind of lapsing into a line of work that wasn't terribly interesting to me, but was nice in that it afforded me a chance to have an income, which was good coming out of college. And so I spent a couple years working at an internet startup. Wasn't terribly interesting. The company was going to fail. The writing was on the wall in that regard. And so at that point, I kind of stepped back and said, well, what is interesting to me, assuming that travel writing is not an accessible path. And, so and so around 2000, I was like, I've always loved, had a great passion for sports, especially for baseball. I love writing. I would like to, can I do something that would pair these two things? And slowly, very slowly, the answer started to be yes. Like that was before you could figure out, that was when it was really hard to have websites and there were no blogs there was no WordPress or Substack to easily be able to distribute what you were doing. So I had to find people who were willing to give me a chance to write for them for free. I did enough of that I was able to nudge my foot in the door when a free daily newspaper, the Boston Metro, launched in Boston in 2001. I started writing a couple of freelance articles for them. In 2002, they got credentialed to cover the Red Sox and invited me to be one of a few people who was covering the Sox for them, which I very enthusiastically did for probably like $25 an article. I had to have a full-time job in order to be able to live and eat. But I did so. I was a freelancer for many, many years. I spent about 6.5 seasons working for the Boston Metro and the New Hampshire Union Leader and some other outlets before finally I got a full-time job with WEEI.com. But I guess in answer to your question, like I knew I wanted to do this when I started doing this. I was in my mid-20s and I discovered that I really loved writing about baseball. I thought I was pretty good at it, and wanted to see whether or not there was a career that could take shape. It did, but it did so slowly. And it took me until I was in my early 30s, and I had to spend several years working different full-time jobs in order to subsidize the career path that I ultimately wanted and have ultimately followed.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think people who want to get into covering sports underestimate how difficult that it is. And I really think like if you're gonna do this, you have to be all in. You know what I mean? Like you have to be truly all in to cover it and be able to want to do the stuff that you talked about, to have that full-time job while covering and doing something that you enjoy. Last year was the same thing. I would work during the day and I would be at Worcester after that, or I'd be up at Fenway Park. It's definitely it's an all, you have to have that all in mentality, in my opinion, to kind of do that. So it's nice to hear the relatabilities, you know what I mean? And you're kind of like your journey's probably gonna be very similar to a lot of people. And then that's I think it's refreshing to hear.
Well, I think, you need to be, I'm not sure about all it, like the part of me was very realistic about it. Like I didn't take for granted that I was going to be able to have a career in this. And so like I admire you, like it is really hard to have a full-time job and then to basically have kind of this side gig that is itself a full-time job because, I was working in academic administration from like 8 or 8:30 in the morning until about 3:30 in the afternoon, then taking a bus over to Fenway in order to be able to cover games and work there until 11:30 or midnight. And I liked my full-time job. I was at the by 2008, which was the year that EEI ultimately hired me. I was going back and forth about whether or not I did think it was realistic and whether or not I actually actively wanted to pursue a career in academic administration because I loved the people I was working with and I liked that job. That job was good and and it was it was easy to envision like a kind of 9 to 5 existence that when you got to spend a lot of time around smart people during the day, but then got to kind of unplug after that. But it requires exceptional commitment, as I think most professions do. Like if you want to be really good at something, then you have to commit pretty wholeheartedly to it. And I think that that's true, not just of journalism. Journalism is hard. The jobs are few. The hours are long. The hours are really, really weird. But I think that that's true of many different walks of life. And so I think that you say being all in. I do think that it's important to find something that you're either passionate about or can enjoy something about it quite a bit in order to find fulfillment, because it's not good to hate what you do.
So one of the things we wanted to talk to you about rather was your book that you wrote in regards to the Red Sox. And there was when I was going through different pieces online, there was actually something on Amazon that I read about the book, and it kind of brought me back to where the Red Sox are at right now, where you kind of talked about where 2018 wasn't really so much a fluke, nor was it guaranteed. And then it says it was more a result of careful, patient planning, shrewd decision-making. I'm kind of wondering, do you see any sort of parallels between what you wrote in 2018 to what maybe the Red Sox are trying to do right now?
In terms of what they are trying to do, sure. I think that the idea, what they had in 2018 was the culmination of several years of creating a scouting and player development juggernaut. They were able to do so in incredible, so there are different waves that have come through and impacted the Red Sox over the course of this will be season number 23 that I'm covering, right? And obviously they won the World Series in 2004, but that wasn't that was taking advantage of what had been pre-existing and supplementing it very well. It hadn't been kind of the vision that Theo Epstein had entered with of building the so-called scouting and player development machine, right? That happened really fast. I mean, ridiculously fast if you think about it. Starting with the 2002 draft preceded Epstein. They drafted John Lester. So that ended up being a huge anchor. But then between in those first 3 years under Theo, they had massive hits in each of those drafts. You're talking about Papelbon in 2003, and you're talking Pedroia in 2004 as a second rounder. And, for that matter, you have the Buchholzes and Ellsburys of the world in 2005. And so that group came together, it took about 5 years, right? Like if you think about it from the arc from 2002 to 2007, there was a significant homegrown element that existed in that 2007 World Series. So then move forward, their farm system, they had this incredible young core. They needed to build a next one behind it, which they did, but that was kind of at the end of the Epstein era. And that's the beginning of the book, 2011, when you have that incredible draft, which was the last time that you could spend as much as you wanted on the draft. And that was a very clear-eyed, forward-thinking organization that took great advantage of the idea that you could get a bunch of comp picks in the draft, which is something that is much harder to acquire now than it was back then. And you could just spend an unlimited amount, so that if, for instance, you took a very athletic high school kid in the 5th round, you could give him $700,000 to not sign it at Tennessee. And then all of a sudden, several years later, you have Mookie Betts. But getting back to your question, that was that was a Ben Cherington overseen build where he was very careful. He was very careful to not give away any of the top level prospects that they had in that period. And so from 2000, that one took a while. 2011 to 2016 was the window where that group really started to go. So 5 years again, where you're looking at formation of a core and professional beginnings of a core. to the realization of what that core could become. Now with this one, it's been a little bit more diffuse, right? Like you didn't have that one wave that you had in 2011, nor did you have that kind of back to back like massive impact drafts that you had back in 2002 to 2005 with the Red Sox. It's been a little bit more, it's been somewhat more sprawling, right? Like you're looking at like, 18, Casas is drafted, Bayo is signing as an amateur. So, you're looking at kind of like maybe that is the beginning of it, but then you're slowly adding pieces along the way. And so that 5-year timetable obviously hasn't been realized, right? Like it's not like Tristan Casas marks the point of origin of this core and 2023 going full blast. You were seeing signs of it, but you weren't seeing it going full blast. And I think that if you're identifying like the locus of this one, you're probably thinking like, you're probably hoping if you're the Red Sox, like 21 or 22 is the point of origin for it with the Marcelo Meyer draft, as well as, and I think that was when they signed Miguel Blaze. So, theoretically you'd want to factor him into the mix. As well as, and then 22, you have Roman Anthony. So realistically, like if a best case scenario is getting 5 years out from that, like you're talking about that's maybe a realistic window for thinking about a core that's able to power championship contention, because I think 24 is unrealistic. 25, you're talking about a bunch of guys, even if there's a best case scenario, transitioning to the big leagues. But again, stepping back, in answer to your question, yes, we are seeing a patient build with the Red Sox. We're seeing a patient build that is taking longer than what the Red Sox envisioned, because I think that when they hired Chaim Bloom, that they envisioned, maybe that 5-year window was going to be opening right about then, and it's taking a little bit longer than that. So I think that you're seeing a more methodical approach than you've ever seen the Red Sox take, because under past administrations, you had seen, while waiting for that core to form or waiting for that core to be brought into the system, you saw bridge years, right? Like you saw aggressive efforts to really bolster what the major league roster looked like, in order to avoid putting too much on players who might not be ready for their big league opportunities. And so hence you had, the original bridge year was Adrian Beltre, John Lackey, and Mike Cameron. Like it was a very high-end, ambitious view of what the major league roster could do in the short term. The most successful bridge year being 2013, when it was, signing guys left and right rather than rushing guys to the big leagues. And in this case, like this is the closest that we've seen. I wrote about this in the Globe. Like this is not the bridge year. This is the sink or swim year, where rather than building out the rotation this offseason, you're seeing more of an approach of, what we like for the Red Sox really do want to see what their young pitchers can look like if given a fuller opportunity to develop with a kind of shifting pitching infrastructure. So patient. This is the potentially lean time of patience.
I'm touching on the pitching too. What do you think of them bringing in Andrew Bailey and kind of the other guys he's brought in to help develop, the guys in the majors and in the minors?
Well, I think that there's a clear attention to bringing in new voices into the pitching infrastructure, which makes all the sense in the world. Like, I'm a lot of people are big on wisdom of crowds, and the idea. I think that the Red Sox had for a number of years, and including through homegrown, had become too insular, had become an organization that didn't have enough, that wasn't kind of refreshing itself and challenging itself with outside views quite enough. So I think that the idea of bringing in people from different organizations, particularly those who've had success from those organizations, is a pretty powerful one. And in this case, they're drawing from, the Cubs, the Giants, the Giants when you're talking about Andrew Bailey, the Twins when you're talking about Justin Willard, and then of course Kyle Bodie with Driveline. That's a lot of different perspective. And so you never know how these things are going to fit together. I think it's premature to say, oh, they've done a great job. We have no idea, right? Like, I think that that's TBD. There's reason to believe that these are a lot of smart people and that they'll and that they create a really nice framework for success. But at the least, I think that the Red Sox should have a very valuable perspective on what they're doing, thanks to the voices that are being added from outside of the organization. I think that this is they're in a good position for very productive self-evaluation.
Yeah, we spoke with Brian Abraham a couple of podcasts ago through our To the Show pod that we have, and one of the things that he mentioned, which, yeah, obviously makes a ton of sense, but he's like, I wish I could say that developing pitching was easy. And he alluded to the exact fact of what you said. It was, bringing in different voices, different perspectives, different points of views to, to basically take these young players they have now and now develop their raw ability to that next level. There is a lot of young pitching in the system that people and fans could get excited about. They're just not those household, number one rotation type guys, but when in reality it's not often you see, other major league clubs that have that surefire ace that's coming up in the system. They're developed and they develop into that. To where,
I mean, I want to push back a little bit on that. Other organizations have players with clearer paths.
I would say it's a better way.
But no, I mean, when the Red Sox have punted on using their amateur resources on pitching for a number of years, and they failed to trade for those top line talents, which is why I think you view the Red Sox. I think that objectively you would view the Red Sox as having one of the worst pitching pipelines, one of the worst pitching talent bases in baseball. You can look and see guys, okay, like that guy has X ability, that guy has Y ability, like Wickelman Gonzalez, minor league leader in strikeout rate among pitchers with 100+ innings. That's great. At the same time, there are warts there, and I think that if you were to identify the top pitching talent, the top pitching prospect in 30 different organizations, where would the Red Sox rank in that look across 30 organizations? Would they be 30?
No, I would say they would probably be in that lower half, because I think that I really think obviously the position players really kind of tilt that ranking for where they're at overall in general. I guess I more meant it in the respect of there might be some arms that, again, that people could get excited about, that if they're just developed the right way, that could kind of lean them back into where, hey, now we might start to see a little more of a pipeline than what we've seen in the past.
No doubt they can, I mean, look, I think that one of the major storylines associated with the Red Sox, one of the most promising things that's happened to them from that patient development standpoint, there are actually a couple of successes on the pitching development front that are wildly overlooked, right? Or at least that are downplayed relative to the shortcomings of what they've done from a pitching development standpoint. Bayo, right? Everyone knows Bayo, so that one's pretty obvious. But Cutter Crawford, to me, is a massive one, right? This is a guy who was a day 3 draft pick, who has completely overhauled his mechanics, who is overhauled, who's really learned what his strengths are, and has become an entirely different pitching prospect from what he was coming out of college, from what he was even just a couple of years ago. I mean, really, he was starting to push the pedal down in 2021, where it was oh, this is interesting. And you're thinking maybe this guy might surprise and become a nice multi-innings reliever, which would have been a huge, huge win for the Red Sox. And he's kept developing. So if you're able to produce, what the Dodgers do better than anyone else is take those guys, those day 3 draft picks, day 2 draft picks, and all of a sudden they're conducting alchemy experiments on. They're they are turning kind of pitching coal into gold, right? I realize that's an imperfect analogy. The better one would have been diamonds, whatever. I'm not so good on the natural resources, but yeah, I think if you're able to do that, then yes, you're right. Objectively, then it transforms the way that you view your system. The problem is that there are a lot of other organizations that are quite good at developing pitchers as well. So you're playing catch up with it. And, and again, in terms of, probability of, in terms of having someone in the organization who represents a high probability rotation contributor in the next couple of years. I think that you have fewer of those with the Red Sox than that path is less clear with the Red Sox than it is with the clear majority of organizations.
Is there a prospect you think that kind of deserves more attention that might be getting a little overlooked at the moment?
As the person responsible for Baseball America's top 10, of course not. I think that everyone, no, I'm kidding. A prospect who is overlooked, who deserves more attention. Sorry, it's a fair question. I spend so much time thinking about the top of the system, that it becomes a little bit, that I kind of lose sight of some of the rest. I mean, I think that there are prospects who are going to be exciting, right? I think that, like, for instance, I think this year, because he didn't play, Mikey Romero took a major hit in terms of his prospect stock. If memory serves, I think I had him maybe number 5 in the system, 5, 7, something like that, entering the 2023 season, and we didn't get to see him at all. I think that there's a very interesting skill set because he would be a very good defensive player at second base. If he is what he showed in high school, right? We don't know that. Part of the reason why his prospect stock has taken a hit is because we haven't seen him, and he's just a pure hitter, right? And one who had some strength in his swing, and so I think that there are some attributes there that are there's some skills there, some attributes there that could be pretty interesting, and and so I think that he's someone who certainly is kind of easy to forget. And for that matter, Miguel Blaze, right? Like we don't talk about him at all when talking about the big prospects who are coming with the Red Sox. I think I had him at number 5 entering this season, but it feels like he ranks like 20, right? As little as we talk about him. But that is, he's a player with as much upside, with more upside than anyone else in the Red Sox system. And so it will be, I'm always a little leery of shoulder injuries, right? And shoulder surgeries and what that can do to a player's offensive approach. But if he is the same dynamic talent that he had shown at times in 2022, then he's probably overlooked right now.
Yeah, because looking at as you're going through that, back through the Baseball America listing, and right now Romero is with the Red Sox system right now is slid down to 16. But to your point, though, he's had that time where he's missed, and there's been that injury piece.
How about you guys? Who do you have as overlooked?
Overlooked. That's a good question. I like to try to find guys who, because you can find anything you want on Kyle Teal and Marcelo Meyer. Guys like, for example, Hunter Dobbins intrigues me.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to talk to him a handful of times. I've never gotten to see him pitch up close, so hoping he gets the opportunity to pitch with Worcester this year to see that. He intrigues me. Rodriguez Cruz, the pitcher, he also. I've more honed in on the pitchers because I'm more fascinated to see what can be developed out of those group of kids. Alan Castro, though, on the offensive side, is another one that it's seemingly, when you saw a highlight of him through social media on Twitter, that the kid's exciting. So those are some of the three. I'm more intrigued by the guys in the lower half of where Sox prospects may have or Baseball America, and to see how their journeys and how they can develop and kind of grow into what could be that next potential big prospect, or that prospect that's being thrown into a deal that brings the Sox something to help them on the major league level.
Yeah, well, that's very fair. I was at Dobbins's Double-A debut, which was actually a kind of interesting and fun look because he had been, there's an adjustment to Double-A, and so he was scattering the strike zone a little bit in the early innings, and was getting close to his pitch count in through 4 innings of work, right? And showed an interesting mix, like he had been around the zone, nothing like overwhelming, but solid debut, I thought. But clearly on a pitch count as he's going back out for the 5th. And then, the beauty of the 5 inning requirement for wins is that it creates an urgency in pitchers, because pitchers, I don't think that there's, no matter how much they intellectually downplay the idea of wins, I don't think there's a pitcher in the world who doesn't care about wins and care about the 5 innings. And so in his last inning, Dobbins, with the sense of like, the ticking deadline, the ticking, like, the expiring window of his pitch count, ended up really letting it eat. Showed his best velocity of the night at like 94 to 96. Ended up showing like a nice slider, a nice split that like had that were aggressive in the zone and were getting misses in the zone. So that was my one little window of Hunter Dobbins that like was like, oh, I like that was your last inning and it was your best one. Those are fun glimpses to have. So you're right that like again, the Red Sox need to hit on guys like Hunter Dobbins. They need to hit on guys like Elmer Rodriguez Cruz. And then I think that this coming year in the draft, we're probably going to see for the first time since Tanner Houck in 2017, the Red Sox. I would be shocked if the Red Sox did not pick a pitcher before pick number 99 of the draft, which is the highest that they've picked a pitcher in the last 6 drafts.
Yeah. I'll probably go with Monegro, Giordani for my underrated one.
Yeah, another interesting one. Certainly came on, again, a guy who took a huge leap forward, particularly with strike throwing over the course of this year. So, stuff playing up is one thing. Stuff in the zone playing up has been a staple of what Craig Breslow has talked about. And Andrew Bailey has always talks about how everything begins with working in the zone. So, the ability to outstuff guys in the zone, like Monegro has at least a couple pitches that have shown promise in being able to do that.
I was wondering, what's your favorite part about covering, a team like the Sox and a city like Boston, where people live and breathe these teams and hang on to every single update?
The idea that that what you write has an audience, right? Like it's that you are like I view journalism as a kind of service industry, right? Like we are trying to my job is to provide information to readers, and in particular information that hopefully they wouldn't be able to easily find elsewhere. And I care about it and I work hard at it. Like with each article that I do, I want to give, I constantly think about what am I offering my readers? And that's in part because I know I have readers, and I am very, very fortunate for that to be the case. I am very fortunate to write in this market where people are passionate through exceptional performances and through failures related to the Red Sox. They remain passionate, engaged, and that there are people who care about what you're doing, and so I find that to be very motivating and and very meaningful. It's what I care about with my job. So we're writing to be read. We're writing for the readers, and Boston is a very special place with regards to providing an incredible audience and an incredibly intelligent audience.
So just we'll transition a little bit to the major league roster, and the definitely not the off season that I think expectations that people placed on the team. I would say more so start with like from a fan standpoint. I think the fans had a higher expectation threshold than what ultimately we've seen. But coming into it, we're a few weeks out, guys like Lucas Giolito, Cooper Criswell, the major league additions, and then through trades, Tyler O'Neill. Of those 3, actually, I'm not even going to include Cooper Criswell. Of the 2, then, of Tyler O'Neill and Lucas Giolito, who do you think by the end of the season will have the bigger impact on the roster?
Giolito, I think, has the clearer role, right? Like O'Neill might end up being a platoon guy, primarily a platoon guy. So I think that you would take Giolito, particularly given, because there's the expectation that he's going to take up this larger fraction of of workload. He is. I think you would project him to throw more innings than any other member of the Red Sox, unless of course he's traded at the deadline this year, which, both of those guys should be viewed, they eyes wide open. They should see them. They should, see the possibility certainly that they will not end the year in a Red Sox uniform, depending upon what's happening with the team through July. But yeah, I think that Giolito has a significant role to play as kind of a staff leader, right? Like he has a wealth of experiences that he can share with some of the younger pitchers on the staff. So I think that they're going to be there are a lot of people who are going to be looking to him to play a central role on the Red Sox. Whereas I think that O'Neill, there's great respect for his talent, for his abilities, but I think that the blueprint is him as a complementary person within the framework of the roster.
Do you think that, or I'll phrase it this way, are you surprised that they haven't moved Kenley Jansen yet to maybe open up the roster a little bit more, depending on what that return would look like?
I'm just skeptical that there would be a big return for him. So no, I'm not surprised that they haven't moved him. I think that he's someone like you explore whether or not there is a team that's willing to give you prospects and take the money, right? Like Craig Breslow has already been very clear. Like I think that the Chris Sale deal represents something of a template for what the Red Sox would want. They would want to acquire, if they're going to be detracting from the 2024 club, they would want someone who could contribute in 2024 and beyond. And, Jansen is still a good pitcher for the Red Sox. So I think, to me, there's a big part of me that thinks that he might have greater value at the if the Red Sox are not in the thick of it at the trade deadline as opposed to this offseason. Because my gosh, look at the number of pitchers who have remained on the market at this point. This isn't exactly like a bonkers market for that. You just had Hector Neris signing for 1 year and $9.5 million, right? In that universe, unless you take on all of Jansen's salary, why would a team give up prospects and take on a ton of that salary? So I'm not surprised. He's a closer. I think that you explore they've been open to listening on everyone. I mean, quite frankly, I think that if they were looking at rentals, dealing rentals, their most valuable one would be Nick Pivetta. I think that he is someone who would be, there would be a lot of interest in him because he has elite stuff. The performance over the last few seasons aligned with the idea that he has elite stuff. He's only under contract through the 2024 season. It's not huge money. The number of starters who you would be able to acquire at his price point and and at his level, at his caliber of quality, they ain't out there, I don't think. And so he's the guy who would have major value, but I think that the Red Sox and I think that there were I think that the Red Sox have view him as an important part of any hopes that they have for 2024. And frankly, because of the stuff elements of what Pivetta brings, and because he loves Boston, I have maintained this for some time. I think that there should be, he's the type of guy who you might want to see. Can you extend him for a couple of years and and have a deal that you're comfortable with? Because he's been reliable, he's been healthy, and I realize that the results have at times fluctuated, but he's been there are a lot of good things that Nick Pivetta has done over the course of his Red Sox tenure.
What are your expectations for Grissom, this year and what he brings to the team?
I think he's someone who has never played a full season at the major league level. So you would expect there to be some performance volatility over the course of the season, but everyone says the same thing about him. Looks like the dude can hit. So, whether or not I think that, I think you're looking at a guy who should be able to deliver at least average offensive production at second base. I'm very leery of any numbers of projecting based on any numbers in AAA last year. Chris, you saw it left and right. Because they turned the strike zone into an absolute joke in AAA last year, it is almost impossible to project performance from AAA in 2023 onto the major leagues in either 2023 or 2024, because you had hitters able to lean back and just swing for the fences with a postage stamp sized strike zone. And so I think that's why you have these massive disparities, for instance, in what Bobby Dahlbeck was able to do in AAA, and then figuring out what he might be able to do in the major leagues, why the strikeout rates just spike so drastically between the two levels. And so at any rate, that's getting a little bit diverted by myself. But yeah, I think that Grissom looks like someone who should be able to deliver at least solid average offensive production at second base, and we'll see how the defense plays. I think that's the bigger test. I think that he because he's a guy who can put the ball in play and can hit it reasonably hard, this is a good formula for a right-handed hitter who, for a right-handed hitter at Fenway Park. And we'll see how far it takes them. But, I think that deal just, to me, is the essence of where the Red Sox are, right? They took away the guy who has, in the short term, the higher ceiling, in exchange for someone who they, in the words of Craig Breslow, can very much be a part of the core moving forward.
No, I mean, it makes sense. And, talking to a lot of the minor league players, it did mainly from the pitcher side, and even the catchers, their displeasure on how the strike zone is. Caleb Hamilton was very vocal when he was down in Worcester, because for him, his bread and butter is how he frames, and you almost take away, a person's job. You know what I mean? At that point, anybody can, they can catch, but there's an art to what they do. So it is, it's interesting when the guys are going from that AAA level and they are going up to the major league level and seeing how they transition. I wanted to use David Hamilton as an example, but I think it's a poor example because he was dealing with a thumb injury all season. He went to go make a dive to the side and he kind of rolled his thumb in his glove. And after that, he wasn't the same player, even with the treatment that he received. But it is a valid point, though. I think there's a lot of stock being put into Grissom's minor league numbers, and we just have to kind of see what that looks like at the big league level.
Yeah, well, in his case, the good thing is that it's not just the 20, he showed a great hit tool, not just in 2023 in AAA, but had a longer track record of that. And, was a very impressive major league contributor in the 2022 season, even when he was jumping straight from AA. Offensively, he was a really good contributor. So, there's obvious talent there. There's a reason why the Red Sox were willing to eat a bunch of Chris Sale's salary in order to be able to acquire him as a longer term asset.
All right. So we'll start to wind it down. You've given us almost 50 minutes of your time. So we're going to ask you some kind of one-off non-baseball. You had mentioned earlier that you were writing for a travel guide and you got to travel. What's the most unique place you've gone to see in the world?
It wasn't for travel guides, but I think that Angkor Wat in Cambodia is the most memorable, dazzling place I've ever been. I think that it reframed how I see the world. Both in terms of thinking about the depth of history, but also the interaction of the ambition of human accomplishment and the ability of nature to completely swallow that was a mind-blowing confluence. And it also it's my wife, and it was part of my honeymoon with my wife, so it's also memorably delightful. It staggering. And then another place that was very special to me in my travels was special might not be the right word, but very impactful, was visiting Dresden in Germany, and seeing this was before it had been reconstructed for its 800th anniversary, and in the mid 1990s, it was still a lot of it was still in ruins as a result of the fire bombings of World War II. And this was a cultural capital for centuries before that, and so it was a very poignant glimpse into both into kind of in a somewhat similar way, a place that had been a monument to enlightenment and beauty, and like this just incredible cultural tapestry of like remarkable museums that had been created in the 1700s, 1800s. The devastation and horror of war and utter destruction in World War II. Of course, you also, like when you're in Germany and you see remnants of World War II, you also think of the horror of the culture that had initiated it, and so it's kind of gutting to think of like this height of civilization that had descended into the height of barbarism, and had resulted in these extremities of modern warfare. And then it also gave a glimpse into what post World War II life was like in East Germany, in that it had gone at that point 50 years without any reconstruction in several areas of this beautiful city. And I found it very moving to be able to see and feel history in so many different forms, and so many different emotional poles in one place.
When you're traveling, are you a foodie as well? Are you excited about trying different different meals out all over the where you've traveled?
Not anymore, because I got kids. So when we go places, I'm looking for chicken fingers.
What's the craziest dish you've had, during those trips, if you could pick one?
I mean, the probably stupidest thing that I did was, I used to, like, I love hot foods, right? Like spicy hot foods. And I for a time I became like so convinced of my constitutional ability to withstand any kind of heat related to food, that I would periodically order things hot and then send them back to the kitchen and say, can this be hotter? And so doing so at an Indonesian restaurant in the Netherlands was my undoing at one point. And I think I think I had hiccups for like 2 days as a result of them responding in kind to my challenge to make something that was spicier.
I like spicy food. I can't do much spice right now, but I do appreciate spicy. Not that spicy.
Yeah,
That's spicy.
sanity has prevailed. I've tempered my ambitions. Although in Inman Square in Cambridge, like there was the East Coast Grill that would have hotter than hell nights, and my wife and I, before we had kids, would periodically drop in there and challenge ourselves in great ways. And yeah, the air was thick with like pepper in like to such an extreme that that members of the staff would, like, some of them had inhalers because it was pretty intense.
This one's kind of a baseball one, but if you could rank your top 5 stadiums that you've been to, what would the top 5 be?
Love Dodger Stadium. Love Fenway. Love Camden. Love what are we calling it in San Francisco now? Yeah, Oracle, right?
Yeah.
And PMC, Pittsburgh. Those are to me, those are like visually spectacular. I love places that can that are paired where they're the integration into the environment. It's not like the wonderful thing about baseball, about ballparks, is the fact that they do not exist in isolation, and that there's like they are contextual. Actually, like, you know, I should throw Wrigley on there too, because like I think that that's like it is such a it's so delightful and fulfilling to have a stadium that's connected to a neighborhood, and not just like connected to it, but like, you know, really like, you know, kind of rising up from it in organic fashion. I will say, like, Camden is very special to me because I grew up in DC, and I followed the Orioles growing up. Camden opened while I was in high school, and so some of my first like drives to a ballpark were to Camden. I do think in the spirit of integration into a neighborhood, Camden, the decision to allow a hotel to be built just beyond left field was a crushing one, because it cut off the most interesting visual landmark of Baltimore that existed behind Camden Yards, which was this bromide seltzer tower that was like totally beautiful, and like you would have sunsets that would that would kind of illuminate in really wonderful fashion downtown Baltimore, and the bromide seltzer building, as well as the warehouse. And now instead you have this butt ugly, like, you know, big old hotel standing there. Boo.
Chris can test this. I've talked to a couple Pirates prospects over the year, and PNC has always been on my list of stadiums to go see at some point.
It's incredible. I hadn't been until 2022, but I thought that it was visually so striking, and the scale of it is also great. There's been some interesting writing recently by Travis Sawchik about how if the last row of most old ballparks was closer to the field than the first row of most upper decks now, and how that's completely changed the scale of how we experience the game and made it less, way less engaging, right? Like if you are, when you are looking at kind of ants running around on the field, right? Like as if you're like having a flyover in the Midwest or something above a highway, like it's a very different experience than when you can see truly what's happening on the field.
Yeah, I like Wrigley a lot. Went there back-to-back years. I think this year though, Coors Field is on the agenda. I think the Red Sox go out there to play the Rockies. It's either right before the All-Star break or right after.
Right after. It is. They open the second half in LA, and then they go to Colorado. I have been to Coors. My first job in baseball actually was in Mile High Stadium in the Rockies' inaugural year. I was getting paid $6.50 an hour to walk I was like 17 years old, and I was walking the stands wearing a purple sweater vest, a bolo tie, and like a goofy straw golfer's hat as a guest relations person for the Colorado Rockies in their first year of existence. And that was an experience because like most of the games that I was working at had 72,000 fans there.
Yeah, Dante Bichette hit the first home run for the Rockies franchise. Well, that was against the Mets though.
I actually negotiated for Dante Bichette to provide a baseball to a fan whose finger he broke with a foul ball in that inaugural season.
Wow.
Interesting. It's interesting.
I almost got fired for doing so.